I'm going to leave these. This is
Get it higher.
a prospectus for the juried show. This is our second juried show in honor of Fred Gage. I don't know if anyone knows him, but he was the chancellor here like 20 years ago. He was the first person I worked with on campus. And we do a memorial exhibit just to honor and remember him. He was a fantastic guy. So I'll leave these up, or maybe I'll leave them on a table because the food table seems to be popular. So Danny Schlenker is the person, he just left a minute ago. He is the person who helps install and light the show. And he's really good, and I'm glad to have him as well. So Steve works totally differently than I do. He's very precise and very organized. I don't know what else, because I paint like this, you know. So it's really a pleasure to see someone else who works so differently and so perfectly. So if you haven't had a chance after he talks, both the Berks County picture over there has a diagram and a list of the items that Steve provided, and the Penn State We Are one also has that next to it. And people have been going through that and taking a trip down memory lane. So, Steve, your guests.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thanks, everybody. I'm really touched by everybody who came out. You know, the Delta 6 representative. You know, many of you may not know that I actually went to school here for 2 years, and where I grew up is right over there. And if you go to Grings Mill, there's a little castle as when you cross the bridge, and just keep on walking, and that leads to my childhood home. So a lot of times I would actually walk to school here. And I never missed a show here when I was here. I love this gallery, and we go through it. And it's kind of it was always a dream of mine. I always thought someday I'm going to show my artwork in that place. So,
And it worked.
It worked. So I appreciate you all being here sharing this with me. It's been a dream. Let's see. Marilyn and Daniel for putting the exhibit together. Thank you very much. They did a tremendous amount of work, and I really appreciate it. Thank you to Penn State for having me. I want to thank my Uncle Joe, who's tucked in the back. When I was a kid, he gave me his Man magazines and his Frank Frazetta books and said, "You got to see this guy, Frank Frazetta. He does Conan the Barbarian." And that was the spark. That really got me started drawing when I was a little kid. When I was like 8, 9, 10, 11, in that range, my mom would say the house would be burning down and you wouldn't even know it, because I would sit there and draw. And a lot of it was Frank Frazetta stuff. And you know, copies of his work. I want to thank my mother and father because they never discouraged it. And I was drawing some like scantily clad women that were real. And, you know, my mom and dad were like, "Oh, that's awesome." You know, I never got any discouragement, and they always encouraged me. So thank you. Without that encouragement, I wouldn't have kept on doing it. My sister Lori and my brother Todd, who are my biggest cheerleaders, thank you. And thank you, Stacy, and my kids, Sarah, Emily, and Cole. They have a lot of patience. They've been my muses. They get tapped on the shoulder, come out in the garage, look at this, tell me what it looks like. Does it look okay? Dad, it's cold out there. My wife hasn't had a dining room table in about 20 years because of all these setups have been sitting on the dining room table. And you know, every art show, I can usually con 1 or 2 of the kids to go along with me. I usually have to bribe with food. You know, tell them we're going to a restaurant somewhere, and that usually gets them out. But they've been very encouraging, and I want to thank them for that. And all of you, I'm thrilled to see some of the faces that are here tonight. Thank you all for coming out. I appreciate it. Marilyn asked me to talk a little bit about my artwork and you know, my method and how I created things. And I think the style that I'm starting to get most noticed for the real complex still lifes, making what you see here in the room. It kind of started when the girls were little. I did a portrait of Sarah, I did a portrait of Emily, and I wanted to do a portrait of Cole. And we were in our basement and we were playing with Hot Wheel cars. There was a long track and there were books in the center, and we're shooting the cars back and forth to each other. And Cole, he was like a year and a half old, and he's in dinosaur pajamas. And any of the people in here who played with Hot Wheels, you've probably done the same thing. When you run them on the track, you bend over and look down the track and try to see the cars going all the way down the track. And that's what Cole was doing. I'm thinking, God, that's so cute. It's like, stop, don't move. And I ran upstairs, got a camera, and started taking all these pictures of Cole, thinking I was going to do a portrait of him. And a little context, the week before, we were up at MoMA, Museum of Modern Art in New York City, and I just remember seeing like Piet Mondrian, Jasper Johns, Andy Warhol. There were a lot of paintings that were grids of color. And not positive or negative, they had a reaction. I just like, wow, there's a lot of paintings that are grids of color. And when I was playing with Cole, I looked down and noticed that he was taking all the cars and he was lining them up in a parking lot, like cars in a parking lot, and I looked down and there's a grid of color. And I thought, well, what if I take a realistic style to abstract organization in paintings? And my first effort at that was that painting that's right there. Yeah, that one right there, thank you very much. That one's called Jam. And I lined the cars up in that grid, and I started taking a photograph of it head on, and it didn't look right. And then when I kind of changed the angle of it, and it was kind of on a weird angle, I thought, that looks cool. And I took a picture of that and painted from that. That actually placed an International Artist Magazine 3rd place in a still life competition. That gave me a little bit of encouragement. I thought, ooh, I kind of wanted something. This painting right here, you get a chance to see it when you come back around. This one's called Crash. When I was working on that, I thought, well, what if I tried to mimic a Jackson Pollock? What if I took a painting with his dimensions and just threw cars instead of paint and did a Jackson Pollock painting, but realistically? That's what that's supposed to be. Now, when I started composing it, I couldn't help but draw your eye to the monster truck. So there is that kind of pyramidal, but that was all me playing around with it later on, after the fact that inspiration for it was trying to do a Jackson Pollock. I did a little talk at Allentown, and one of the guys in Allentown said, you use a lot of repeating shapes over and over again. And he said, I like the fact that you use cars as a shape. And I thought about that. I said, well, I'm not really a car junkie. I just happen to be doing the Hot Wheel cars. But I thought, what's the most interesting shape, I think, is a human form. And I thought, well, what if I did another painting but with a human form? And that led to this one, which is a pile of soldiers. That was the next one in the series. A lot of people look at that and say, is there a political message in the painting? I'm not trying to be overly political or very serious. I mean, I'm trying to paint a pile of soldiers that a kid would play with. But there is kind of, that weird feeling of lost innocence when you're thinking about a pile of soldiers. And, that, I like the fact that people read the paintings the different ways. Another one that's like that, I finally did get around to painting a portrait of Cole. Serial. Way up front.
You can leave them over there if you like.
Serial was kind of like the next one I was thinking about. I finally got around to doing a portrait of Cole. He was 8. We were watching TV, and there was a show on TV about a serial killer. And my 8-year-old son said, Dad, what's a serial killer? So, I explained it to him as best I could, and he's sitting there still looking at me like confused. And I'm like, yeah, you thought it had something to do with breakfast cereal, didn't you? And he's like, yeah. So then, what was a serious moment turned into a nice little laugh. And I thought, and there's a painting there. And in that painting, it's the same thing. It's a collection of cereal nostalgia. But if you look at all the stuff that's in there, it's pirates, it's aliens, it's killers. So it's all things that are, toy icons, but they're all dangerous things. A guy I worked with when I was creating that painting, I was telling him about it, and he said, you want to put in an O.J. Simpson Wheaties box? box. And I'm like, well, that's brilliant. I looked online, OJ was never on the Wheaties box, but I did find there was a cereal in the 70s called OJ's. That was like an orange juice based cereal. So if you look, there's another like little hint killer. You'll see a refrigerator magnet that says OJ on the magnet in that painting. A lot of my most recent work are simply celebrations. You know, and two that I'm most proud of is Berks County over on that wall, and we are over on that wall. We are, what inspired that, I heard the story of Wallace Triplett and how the whole We Are Penn State cheer came about. And you know, that came about because Penn State was going to play a football game in Florida, and Wallace Triplett was black. There were a couple black guys on the team, and they said, you can come play, but not with those guys. And the team got together and said, no, we are Penn State. You either take all of us or you take none of us. And the following year at the Cotton Bowl, a similar thing happened. They didn't have a hotel room for them. And they said, you take all of us or you take none of us. We are Penn State. And that's what, you know, I think most students probably have no idea where that cheer came from. But I heard that story, I'm like, wow, we've got a lot to be proud of as a university. So I just started to try to celebrate that and include a lot of things. And I'm so thrilled that so many of my fraternity brothers showed up from school. And their names are hidden in that painting. Because to me, that's one of the best things about Penn State is the people I make friends with. But there's a lot of stuff, subtle stuff. One of the facts that I learned that I thought was really cool, in the comic books, Bruce Banner, the Incredible Hulk, he's a Penn State grad in the comic books. I never knew that. So that's why everyone's like, why is the Incredible Hulk in the Penn State painting? That's why. You know, the Berks County one, same thing. There's a lot of things in there that are very direct. If you're from Berks County, you know Keith Scheuring was from here, in Austria, and Chris Shear, and John Updike, and Taylor Swift. But you know, when I was a kid, I grew up near the Reading Airport, and I loved going to the Reading Air Show. I never missed a minute of it. My wife and I went there on our third date. I actually found an air show program from 1987, which was our first date. So that's in there. There's a hidden portrait of my kids in there. So there's a lot of stuff like that that's hidden in there as well. In terms of painting method, Marilyn asked that I include an unfinished painting. This is what I'm working on now. You'll notice that it's unfinished in the upper left. I'm left-handed, and I usually paint with a hook. So I stable myself with my pinky, so I'm usually painting from bottom right and coming to upper left. One thing that I was always disappointed in, you'll notice there's a background paint on the painting. When you have a turpentine jar, all the paint settles out in the bottom and you get this mud that's in the bottom. It's a real environmental issue trying to dispose of that stuff. I just thought, like, that might make a good background. So I actually pulled that out, the mud out, and used that as a primary coat on the paintings. I started doing that right after a pile of soldiers, and it really had a dramatic impact on the vibrancy of the paintings. And I got to avoid an environmental issue. You'll notice the grids, all the photographs taken on my iPhone. No special cameras, take on the iPhone, go over to Staples, have them printed out. And then I usually paint, one of the reasons I paint a lot of small objects is I'm painting at night and on the weekends, so I can't paint from life very often. So I use the photographs as kind of a general reference, but then I actually sit there and I hold up the objects under a light so that I can really see what's going on and pick up more details that I would miss otherwise. There's lots of stories about the paintings. There's lots of hidden stuff in the paintings. I encourage you to ask my kids. They'll tell you different stories about different paintings. Thank you all for coming out. It's really a thrill for me to see all the faces out here. You know, I was going to do it, but I'm going to do it. I'm getting a selfie with you. This is too Thank you. Cool. Thanks everybody for coming out.